Hi, third graders. This book is Indian Shoes. We've heard a little about this from our previous lessons, but I'm going to read this book to you. So get settled in for a little read aloud. Chapter 1. The very first chapter is called Indian Shoes. Actually, before I read the chapter, I wanted to read a little part of the inside cover. It says, "What do Indian shoes look like anyway? Like beautiful beaded moccasins or high tops with bright orange shoelaces?" Okay, let's start the story. Indian shoes. Ray and Grandpa Half Moon traipsed down the cracked sidewalk of a steel and stone city. Ray tracked Grandpa's steps, danced to the rat-a-tat-a-clang of a trash can band, and skipped beneath the ruffling branches. "Let's duck in here," Grandpa Half Moon began, "and say morning." When the wind whistled into Murphy Family Antiques, Ray and Grandpa whistled in with it. At the welcome mat, Grandpa said, "Morning," to Junior Murphy. Ray retied his neon orange shoelaces and took a look around the store. The shop brimmed with treasures: an autographed baseball, a Chinese lantern, ostrich feathers, a basket of antique buttons on a pedestal, a tabletop held up by a real elephant leg, a moose head mounted high on a wall. Where are the coats that matched the old buttons? Ray wondered. What happened to the rest of the elephant? Who took the body of the moose glaring down? Grandpa asked. Do you see that? A pair of men's moccasins waited in a glass box on a pedestal. The card read, Seminole moccasins from Oklahoma, 150, 100, 75. All of these prices were crossed out, and now it said, or best offer. Grandpa Half Moon told Ray, "These put me in the mind of being back home." For a long moment, they both looked at the moccasins, but Ray's mind was mostly on their afternoon plans, and his gaze wandered to the autographed baseball. "We best get a move on," Grandpa said, "to today's Cubs game." The famous baseball team. Grandpa and Ray left the shop with matching grins. They rode the rattling elevated train to Wrigley Field and watched the Cubs take on the St. Louis Cardinals. From the first inning on, Grandpa Half Moon told old time Cherokee, Seminole, and family stories. "Every once in a great while, my Gramps used to wear moccasins," Grandpa said, "instead of his cowboy boots." Grandpa paused a moment to study the Cubs scoreboard. "He used to pitch to me and my cousins, too, and Gramps usually struck us out. Then he'd jump in the lake to cool down afterward, just like us kids. The lakes back home in Oklahoma, those are the prettiest lakes I've ever seen." Ray frowned, thinking it over. Not far away, Lake Michigan lapped against the shores of Chicago. A fierce blue blanket alongside the park. It was a pretty lake, Ray decided. A lot bigger than the lakes in Oklahoma, more sailboats. After the seventh inning stretch, Ray and Grandpa Half Moon ordered hot dogs. "Now, these Chicago hot dogs," Grandpa said, "they're dandy, but every now and then I get a hankering for some of that crackle fried bacon your Aunt Wilhelmina likes to make. You know, that woman fries everything she cooks. I saw her fry a whole turkey once for Christmas, and it was sure enough some big bird." Ray bit into his hot dog. He knew all about Aunt Wilhelmina's cooking. Ray and Grandpa drove their pickup down to visit her and Uncle Leonard in Oklahoma once or twice a year. What he didn't know was why Grandpa Half Moon was thinking so hard today about Aunt Wilhelmina's crackle fried bacon. When the wind carried a home run baseball into the stands, Ray almost caught it. Cheers filled the air, but Grandpa Half Moon didn't make much of a fuss. He was homesick, Ray realized. Ray wiggled his toes inside the high tops with the neon orange shoelaces. Here's the picture of the ball coming to them in the stands. Ray wiggled his toes inside the high tops with the neon orange shoelaces. He couldn't afford a bus ticket to Oklahoma, but he had an idea. Ray thought about it during the last two innings of the game and while riding on the rattled elevated train all the way back to the stop nearest his red brick bungalow. Meanwhile, Grandpa Half Moon talked about this wild haired mutt he'd had when he was a kid and how he'd named it Catastrophe. Grandpa talked about Ray's parents who were killed by a tornado back when Ray was just a babe. And Grandpa talked about how he used to take Ray's daddy fishing by starlight. At bedtime, the wind breathed against the stained glass pane in Ray's bedroom window. He dumped jangling money, $28.67, out of his jar and onto his woolly blanket. It was the most money Ray had ever owned at one time, but it wasn't enough. Or was it? The sign had said $50 or best offer. Maybe the best offer would be a little less than $30. Maybe the best offer would come from Ray. On Monday after school, Ray marched down the cracked sidewalk. He'd held on tight to his money jar, danced to the rat-a-tat-a-clang of a trash can band, and skipped beneath the ruffling branches. When the wind blew into Family Murphy Antiques again, Ray blew in again with it. At the welcome mat, he retied his neon orange shoelaces and said, "Afternoon" to Junior Murphy. Then Ray breezed by the table with the elephant leg and the basket full of antique buttons. He paused behind a lady who was carrying a library book. The lady seemed interested in the moccasins. "Do you know if these are real?" she asked. "Native American worn and Native American made?" "I could double check," Junior Murphy answered, "but it might take a while." "I don't have a while to wait," the lady replied, "and I don't walk by this way too often." She hugged the library book a little tighter. "I'll tell you what, I could give you $30 for them now, but that's all my budget will allow." Ray shook his head at the moose. $30 topped his best bid. Just then the wind rushed in. The door sounded kabam! Ostrich feathers fluttered. A Chinese lantern whirled to catch on the moose's antlers. The autographed baseball splashed into the button basket, toppling the pedestal. Buttons whizzed everywhere. Ray thought, "This is my last chance. I'll give $28.67 for the moccasins," he told Junior Murphy, "and I'll pick up every last button, too." "Sorry, Ray," Junior said. "This shop needs the money more than I need the time." The lady looked at Ray like she wanted to say something, but then she set her book on the counter and wrote a check to pay for the moccasins. The wind died silent, and Ray felt like the elephant that had lost a leg to the tabletop. He rocked in his tie tops with the orange shoelaces. He stared at the autographed baseball in the mess of buttons. He thought about the stories Grandpa Half Moon had told at the Cubs game and on the train ride home. When the lady opened the door to leave, the wind gusted in and shoved her back over the welcome mat. Suddenly, Ray knew what to do. "Want to trade?" he asked the lady. "I've got some Indian shoes you could use. Beats me who made 'em, but they're for sure Indian worn." The lady shifted the book beneath her arm and held tight to her purchase. Ray just knew that he and Grandpa Half Moon had lost out. But then the lady's gaze fell to Ray's feet. She chuckled, and they left the shop together. When the wind whispered against the brick bungalow that night, Grandpa slid his feet into the moccasins. These really take me back, he said. They feel like home. Come Tuesday morning at the high school, 4 blocks away, the librarian placed a pair of beat up high tops with neon orange shoelaces in her Native American books display. She propped a laser printed card to the right of the toes. The card read, traded from Ray Half Moon, Cherokee Seminole high tops. Not Indian made, but Indian worn, guaranteed. All right. So that's the end of chapter 1 called Indian Shoes. Um, let's go on to chapter 2. This chapter is called Don't Forget the Pants. Oh no, what is this one going to be about? Don't forget the pants. As Ray and Grandpa Half Moon climbed a flight of stairs to the front terrace of the rented mansion, I'm thinking about what this looks like. The front terrace of the rented mansion. Jonah appeared to greet them. Welcome to the wedding, he said. I believe, Ray, Grandpa began, smoothing his church tie, that you and the groom have some business to attend to. Grandpa was right. That afternoon, Jonah, a Polish Menominee from Chicago, was marrying their friend Nancy Lee, a Choctaw girl who'd moved to town from Norman, Oklahoma. She'd been friends with the Half Moons for only a year or so, but being that every kid in the bride's and groom's families was a girl, Ray had agreed to pitch in as their ring bearer. Ray had never been to a wedding before. He knew he'd have to carry the ring down an aisle in front of a lot of people staring, and worse, a video camera. Ray's stomach flopped and flipped just thinking about it, but he was looking forward to the wedding cake. Yes, of course. Okay. Jonah bent down in his gray tux. This was my grandmother's wedding ring, he explained, digging it out of his breast pocket. Today it'll become Nancy Lee's. Ray watched as Jonah set the white gold band in his palm. Tiny diamonds glittered. The metal felt cool in Ray's hand. Sure is pretty, says Grandpa, who was carrying Ray's belt, socks, and dress shoes. I'll take good care of it, Ray said, curling his fingers tight. He looked down at his fist and then handed the ring to Grandpa. I mean, we'll take good care of it. Jonah grinned, all bright blue eyes and dimples. I'd appreciate that, Jonah said. As it turns out, Nancy Lee remembered everything except a pillow to carry it on. Ray couldn't understand why he'd need a pillow to carry the ring. He'd been carrying things his whole life without a pillow. That's how it goes with weddings, Grandpa said, slipping the ring into his jacket pocket. This or that always goes wrong. Ray and Grandpa Half Moon walked past a window framed in forest green velvet curtains, climbed a spiral staircase, strolled down a hallway with fuzzy burgundy wallpaper, and joined the groomsmen in an upstairs bedroom. A row of rented gray tuxes and crisp white shirts had been hung in the closet, and Grandpa pulled out the smallest sizes in each after handing Ray his belt, socks, and dress shoes. This'll look mighty handsome on you, Grandpa said, leaving on the plastic wrap. Ray headed toward the bathroom to get dressed for the wedding. Need any help? Grandpa called, shaking hands with the best man. Nope, Ray said. I'll be okay. He'd already tried on the tux at the fitting, and Ray figured once he'd dressed, he could always ask for Grandpa's expertise with the tie. He didn't want to look like a little kid in front of the groomsmen. When Ray shut the heavy door behind him, he was happy to find a full length mirror on the back of it. In no time, he'd pulled off his Cubs t shirt and the neon purple sweatpants. He'd hooked the two hangers over the crystal doorknob and torn away the plastic covering plastic covering his crisp white shirt. Before long, he had it on and buttoned straight. Ray thought he looked just fine in the shirt and his 2-day-old trim from Bud's barber shop. Feeling braver, he decided to take on the bow tie. The bow itself was already tied, and there was a little hook and a little loophole for fastening around the collar. Aha, Ray thought, I can do this. I won't even need Grandpa's help. Seconds later, Ray studied his reflection in the mirror, wearing the bow tie just right. Now it was time for the jacket and slacks. But when he slipped the gray jacket off the hanger, its matching pants were nowhere to be found. The second hanger was empty. Ray quickly pulled on the jacket, opened the bathroom door a crack, and called for Grandpa Half Moon. How are you doing in there? Grandpa asked, walking over with a white rosebud boutonniere. Ray stepped back from the door to let him in. No pants, he said, holding up the empty hangers. Can you double check in the closet? Grandpa set the boutonniere on the counter and sped off, while Ray waited in the bathroom. A couple of minutes later, Grandpa returned and shut the bathroom door. No pants, Grandpa confirmed. I checked 3 times. They could still hear the groomsmen laughing outside about who knew what, but in the bathroom, nothing seemed too funny. Ray shifted his weight from one sack-clawed foot to another. I can't go out there in my underwear, he said, holding up his neon purple sweatpants. Can I just wear these? I don't reckon so, Grandpa answered. Everybody'd be staring at you instead of Nancy Lee. Rap, 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 rap came a knock on the bathroom door. Ray and Grandpa heard the best man's friendly voice. 10 minutes until showtime, he said. Can't we just get another pair of pants? Ray asked. Grandpa shook his head. Not in 10 minutes, but I have another idea. Grandpa excused himself to see if any of the guests were sporting pants Ray's size. Meanwhile, Ray paced and puttered and made faces at himself in the mirror. 6 minutes later, Grandpa Half Moon returned empty handed. The only other kids at the wedding were frilly girls, he reported. The kind with lace and bows. Too bad I can't borrow your pants, Ray said, but I'd drown in them. For another minute, Ray and Grandpa tried to come up with a solution. They even thought about Grandpa pitching in for Ray, becoming the oldest ring bearer ever, but they decided he couldn't do that without being specially asked. Then Grandpa Half Moon stepped out to talk to the best man about handling the ring delivery, but he'd already left with the groomsmen to usher. So Grandpa searched for someone else. But the groom was talking to his daddy in one room, and the bride was hugging her auntie in the other. No luck, Grandpa announced, returning to Ray. He glanced at his pocket watch. We've got about a minute and a half. Ray felt like his bow tie was strangling him. I can't go out there half naked, he replied. Grandpa looked from his own pants to Ray's bare legs. Maybe you can borrow my slacks after all. At least it's worth a try. At the last rap, 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 rap knock, Ray stared at his reflection. He looked smart enough in the white shirt, tux jacket, white rosebud boutonniere, and Grandpa's church slacks, rolled at the waist and leg bottoms, held tight by his own leather belt. He grinned at Grandpa, standing there in his boxer shorts, and said, It'll do. You look like your daddy did back when he got married, Grandpa said, except shorter, don't you know? So here's a picture of Ray standing in Grandpa's pants. And there's Grandpa in his boxer shorts. Almost done with this story. As the heart began to sing, Ray marched out of the bathroom, through the hallway with the fuzzy burgundy wallpaper, down the spiral staircase, and past a window framed in forest green velvet curtains, barely in time to start down the aisle. The maid of honor led him in front of the line of bridesmaids to a little girl no older than 5. She gripped a basket of white rose petals and stared at him with scared, watery eyes. Ray couldn't help feeling sorry for her. He was pretty nervous himself. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll do all right." After all, Ray thought, the worst part is behind me. Just then, Ray realized he'd forgotten the wedding ring. Grandpa Half Moon still had it upstairs in his jacket pocket. Oh, uh-oh, Ray thought. I'll never make it back in time. Racing around bridesmaids, he was just about to shoot up the spiral stairs when he spotted Grandpa Half Moon peeking from behind one of the forest green velvet curtains. A lace trimmed tablecloth had been tied around his waist. In his outstretched hand, waiting for Ray, was Nancy Lee's diamond ring. So, did you guys catch that? Grandpa was hiding behind the curtain with a tablecloth wrapped around his waist because he didn't have any pants anymore. And he couldn't come out there to give Ray the ring. So he just waited for Ray to come and get it from him. That is a pretty funny and freaky story, huh?